Hi guys, how we doing? So just wrapping up the week here at work, and there's a topic which keeps coming up more and more and more now. With the price of properties rising here in Spain and people still wanting to move over, they are looking for, especially our clients and other people that are here, about looking for more viable options of where to stay in the UK while their visa is being processed, because obviously your passport's taken off of you and it's left at the consulate, and you may have sold a property and you need a temporary accommodation to which is not going to eat too much into your budget before you get your visa to move to Spain. And then when you move to Spain, a lot of people are looking for alternatives to actually buying a property to live, which are maybe cheaper, which allow them to live here on the non-lucrative visa and not work. So we're going to talk today about mobile homes, caravans, and how they fit in to the whole non-lucrative visa process. Stick about. Right. Okay. So it seems to be coming up more and more. So I recently did a podcast as well with Bambi and Jojo, who have set up their own. It's like a mobile home caravan. I don't really, you call them, like, they're not really caravans. So my image of a caravan is something you hook on the back of the car and take around with you. These luxury mobile homes are big square things on these beautiful parks most of the time here in Spain, and it's where people live, and they're a lot cheaper than actually buying a house. And there's also a little bit more flexibility with them in terms of selling them, buying them, because they don't have to go through the land registry and stuff like that. So we're going to talk about that a bit later on, but what I want to do is talk about the timeline, getting your documents right if you're somebody who's got a motorhome and thinking of using it for your move to Spain. I mean, this is, a lot of people have motorhomes and they're thinking of using them in Spain and then bringing them and registering them in Spain maybe and living in them here. But then there's this whole thing of, what do I do about my address? Well, let's start from the beginning. I was going to say it's a stupid thing to say, isn't it, really? But anyway, so let's look at the timeline and what you would do and what the consulate would require and what would be required here in Spain. So first of all, for the non-lucrative visa, when you go to your appointment, so we've got to look at the point, when you go to your appointment, your folder with all your stuff in it is absolutely full, is correct, and has all the documents that you need to go, and obviously for a successful appointment. And then look at that, including your application forms and your documents, and say, well, how is that going to relate to me not having a permanent address and living in a mobile home, for example? Right. So when you go to the consulate, you have to take your application forms. You have to take your, obviously, all the required criminal records, medical certificate, blah blah blah. We're not going to talk about in this video, but you have to take the application forms with a UK address on them. And you also have to take proof that you reside in the consular district, and that proof needs to coincide with the documents that the application form address you use. So what we have had, multiple scenarios in the past of people who have sold homes and then gone and lived in their mobile home maybe for a few months while the visa is being processed. So what address did they use? Well, there's a couple of scenarios that we've seen. People who have sold their homes which very, very close to the time of the appointment, or actually just after the appointment or around the time of the appointment, you can still use your old address as your permanent address, because that is the truth. Okay, that is your last permanent address. So if it's very, very close to the time that you're going to your consulate appointment, then we find there's never been a problem, as long as the documents that you present all match that address, which includes your criminal records, etc., your application forms, the proof that they ask for, that you actually live in the consular district, so a copy of your driving license, front or back. Make sure you take the original, or a council tax bill or something like that. But in these circumstances where you have sold your property, you have no permanent address in the UK, and you have a completion statement from a lawyer, then it's true. It's just tell the truth. Say we have sold our property. That was our last permanent address in the UK, and we've sold it. Here's the completion statement. This is why we qualify, and we're currently living, in a temporary accommodation, which is, our caravan. You'd have to state that, just have temporary accommodation until we get our visa, because that is the truth. And we've had people do that, and it hasn't been a problem. But what happens if, say, for example, you sold your house 3, 4, 5 months? Now, there is no determined rule here. Can I just say that of this timeline? I'm just saying, if you're close, maybe a month or two before your appointment, my previous statement would be okay. But if you start looking at 3, 4, 5 months, then the person behind the desk may ask questions. They may say, well, hang on a minute, have you really been living in temporary accommodation, living in a mobile home for 4 or 5 months? At this point, would you have had obligations to maybe change the address on your driving license, maybe change address on certain things like bank accounts, etc.? So the longer you have that gap between selling that permanent address and actually going to your appointment is going to create more questions. Okay, so say you sold it in February, you're going to your appointment in June, they're going to say, well, where have you been living since then? You can't tell me you've been a no fixed abode. So if it's quite close, I'd say you wouldn't have a problem. But if it's further, then at that point, I'd be maybe looking towards a family member or a friend or something. You could use their address as the temporary address. So at that point, you could maybe have all your documents, your application forms. Maybe you'd have to change your driving license as well to that address, just to prove that you're residing at that address, and use that as your temporary address before moving to Spain. Okay, I hope I've made that clear, because there's no set rule to this. You've just got to use your common sense, really. But the main thing is that on all your documents that you present, that the address actually matches. Again, if you've sold a property and you're living maybe in a caravan, but you're using somebody else's address as your permanent address, which is absolutely fine, because basically, as far as the consulate's concerned, you could be living on their drive, who knows? Then you want to make sure that the documents, because you're using that in your application form, actually match that address as well. So yeah, but it can be done. There's no problem. So what I'm saying is, and always when you sell a property, make sure you get a completion statement from the lawyer that isn't just a rubbish email telling you the funds that you got, that's on headed note paper to say, look, this was our permanent address. We've either moved into this family member's address or moved into this friend's address, or if you're really close to the appointment, as I mentioned before, we have no address, but we're using our previous one because we only sold it about 3 weeks ago and we're waiting to get the visa. Okay, don't forget also, all of this you can put in a presentation letter if you really want to. So there's no requirement at all to write a letter telling the consulate about your circumstances. But if you feel there's anything that needs to be explained that's reflected in the paperwork, why not? You write a letter, let them know, say, look, this is our plan, this is what we're doing, this is where this address comes from. At the end of the day, they're human beings. It's landed on a desk, and never has anybody been rejected for a wrong address. They may have been told to go to a different consulate, but we've never seen anybody rejected for having the wrong address. So a pure and simple explanation will be absolutely fine. This brings me to my next point. What's my next point, Chris? What's your next point? Selling main address, proving address, where they send the visa. Here we go. So you can see I've scripted this out well. Where they send the visa. Well, when you get to the BLS office, they send the visa to wherever you tell them to. Okay, so you get a separate envelope that you get to fill out, and you can put a different address on that if you want, to the address you use in your application forms, which will be the case in the first scenario that I told you. You can have the visa sent to a friend or something like that. The passports will be sent to the friend. So yeah, that's not a problem either. Where you get your passport sent. So far, I'm talking from experience of our clients. Remember, here we've nearly done 600 visas now. We actually, on a side note, we're going to do a 500 visa celebration, and I broke my arm literally the week we were organizing it all. We haven't managed to put it together yet since then. So but we're nearly up at 600, and really, it's so far the last couple of years, they give you your envelope, you fill it out as part of the process. It's no problem sending your passport somewhere else. Okay, remember, you don't have to make anything up. You are moving to Spain. It's your story. Everybody's going to have, you know, a something else going on with their address. And not everybody's going to have the luxury of being able to keep a UK property and a Spanish property, for example. So just tell the consulate or tell the BLS office and reflect it in the letter, as I said, what your plans are and what you're doing. So anyway, Spain. Sorry, you have to excuse me. I fancied a coffee. So we've done the UK part. Not a problem. But now you've got your visas in your hand, you're jumping in your motorhome and you're coming to Spain. Okay, so we've got that, and on your application form, you've used a temporary address in Spain, because at the moment in the UK, different to other consulates around the world, in the UK, you don't have to have proof of where you're actually going to be living in Spain. You just have to have an address on your application forms. That said, side note, if you have a rented accommodation or have bought a property in Spain, it's always good to take the proof of that with you to your initial appointment. But you've used a temporary address, you're coming over with your motorhome and you're coming to Spain. How is that going to affect you? Well, initially, it depends where you're going to be parking up and living. Now, a lot of places will allow you to park up and live temporarily, and a lot of places will allow you to actually live full time on these campsites or places which allow you to park mobile homes and camper vans, for example. But the problem comes with something that's called a padrón certificate, certificado de empadronamiento. Okay. Now, the padrón certificate is what proves where you live. All right. And the criteria for that is you have to register at your local town hall. And when you go to your town hall to register, and we've got a great article on our website and loads of videos on here about it, so check it out on our website. Just search your padrón on there. The criteria is basically that you have to prove either by ownership of a property or by renting a property, okay, that you live in that property. And then you will be given this certificate which says, yes, I'm registered on a local town hall. This is where I live. It benefits the town because the town get more money for more citizens, and it benefits you because things like your driving license and the S1 depend on getting this document. So it could be a little bit more tricky here for you if you can't get a padrón certificate. In the first instance, the first hurdle will be getting your TIE card. So say, for example, you come in, you're in a camper and you park up in somewhere in Torrox or something, and you are on a temporary campsite. What address are you going to use for your TIE card? The question is there are provinces like Malaga, certain stations in Murcia, police stations where you register, and certain ones in Alicante where you can rock up with your application forms with a Spanish address, no proof you live at that address because it's the first time registration. And as long as your visa temporary Spanish address was in the same province, they're not going to ask you for a padrón certificate, especially here in Malaga. They don't. So if you had a temporary address in Malaga, when you used your when you registered your visa application and you come over here and you've just put down address in Malaga, they don't normally ask you for a padrón for the first registration. But when you come to do your driving license, or if you're an S1 applicant, you're definitely going to need a padrón certificate. So if you're in a camper van, you've got to find somewhere which will allow you, maybe a campsite, to register at that site. What we've seen before is a lot of these sites which have permanent residents actually issue a letter to the town hall, and the town hall then allow people to register there. We've seen this in Marbella before over there. I think it's called Cabo Pino. I think it's called over there in Cabo Pino. They just issue a letter, let people stay on there, and that's fine. There's a lot of people who've got the fixed mobile homes, actually caravans on there and motorhomes, and they've been able to, at a permanent fixture, get a letter, register the visa, and happily doing their renewals there. But if you can't get that, you may run into trouble. It's very, very difficult to live a nomadic life in a motorhome in Spain unless you have somebody who's kind enough to let you register at their address, or you have a property where you can actually register at. So I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm not saying you couldn't get your TIE card without it, but without the padrón and without having somewhere to register that your van is actually there, as I say, some campsites allow you to do so. Then down the line, when you come to renewals, driving license exchanges, and the S1, you could have problems. So it's just a case of getting yourself planned really, really, really well. But as I say, we've had plenty of people do it. We've had people come over with their camper vans. They've got sites here where they stay. They can be permanent residents on their sites, register on their sites, and happily live in their camper vans. I know we've done it in Marbella. I know we've done them down the coast. Speaking to Bambi and Jojo the other day, I was actually speaking to Bambi because they're going to be doing their 1 year celebration business, like 1 year after opening celebration here in Alhambra de la Torre, which is great. So it means we'll be going. A lot of the sites that they use, they issue letters to people for their mobile homes that people buy, and they can go down to the town hall and actually get their padrón using the letters. So it's a case of doing your research beforehand. It's not impossible, but you got to do your research. Provinces like Almeria, Granada, Cadiz, where we know that they ask for a padrón straight away. Boom, at the appointment, we want you to prove where you're going to be living. And if you're on a non-lucrative visa, you're going to find it a lot harder because it's going to be difficult to get a padrón if you have no fixed address. So, yeah, that's all I wanted to discuss today. I hope that hasn't confused you at all. Yes, it's possible. You've got to be vigilant about your address. But people are nowadays looking for alternatives for cheaper accommodation. Spain is extremely popular at the moment. Everybody that you talk to who has anything to do with moving to Spain, all right, it's like, so us and everybody in our business network and anybody you speak to at the moment who is providing any service in any of the popular areas is absolutely stacked, and people are moving over. Spain is a popular place, which now is evidently being reflected in the house prices, and they are going up, and people still want to come and live here and live the dream. And mobile homes are an option to get cheaper and very nice accommodation. And obviously some people want to live a nomadic life and ride around in a camper van, which would be beautiful on retirement, but you got to make sure you've got that bolt hole or that address where you can keep all your stuff registered. Anyway, guys, thanks for listening again. I hope you found that useful, and we'll be back with another video soon.